Hello everybody, this is Lisa Johnson from Everbridge. Thank you so much for joining us for today's webinar, The Art of the Drill, CMS Ready Emergency Preparedness Drills featuring Steve Goldman. Welcome, Steve.
Hi, Lisa.
Let me introduce Steve more formally. He is a senior lecturer at MIT and a partner with Steve Goldman Associates. He is an internationally recognized expert and consultant for business continuity, crisis management, disaster recovery, and crisis communications. He has over 30 years of experience specializing and creating and conducting realistic drills and exercises, which makes him a perfect fit for today's topic. We are going to start, before we get into the webinar itself, with some poll questions. So we wanted to see where you guys were for your readiness, and I'm going to launch the first poll now, which was, when was the last time you had a tabletop drill at your facility? So you should be able to see it now. Please vote. So we're looking to see if you've had a drill in the past 12 months, 18 months, 24 months, or for the purposes of today's poll, really if you've never had one. So please vote. We'll hold it open for a few more seconds. Quite a few of you has had a drill in the last 12 months, so that's a great number to see. I'm going to close the poll now and share the numbers with you. There. So you should be able to see the results. So 75% of you have had a drill in the past 12 months, 6% in the past 18 months, 8% in the past 24 months, and 10% have never had a drill. So that's good that you're here today. We will definitely give you some information to get started on that. So along that line, we're going to go to our second poll question, which is, have you had an active drill? So the first one was for tabletop. The second one is for active. You should be able to vote now. And we're asking the same parameters of 12, 18, and 24 months. We're seeing really good numbers again, so that's great.
Yep.
Yeah.
Looks good.
Steve and I are both impressed. We're going to hold this for a few more seconds, so get your votes in. And I'm going to close it right now, sharing the results with you. So you should be able to see the screen. If not, 83% of you have done active drills in the past 12 months, which is actually higher than the tabletop drills. So 4% in the last 18, 7% in the last 24, and only 6% have never done it.
That's
so
good. Very good.
Those are great to see. Okay, we have one more to do. Are you planning, when are you planning to have your next drill? And again, you can vote. This is our last poll question for today. We really appreciate your participation. And as you guys know, the CMS Emergency Preparedness Guidelines require that you do an active drill and either a second active drill or a tabletop drill during between now and November of next year. And I'm going to close the poll and share the results. So again, 70% of you within the next 6 months, and then 19% in the next 12 months. So that's almost everybody. That's 89%. And at this point, I'm going to close this poll, and we're going to move on over to Steve. This is all yours. Take it away.
Great. Thank you, Lisa. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. What we're going to talk about today is the CMS Emergency Preparedness Guidelines. Then I'll get into how to get started, what resources are available, and the great 8 points for a successful drill. I'll follow this with after you do your drill, then what? I will summarize, and this will be followed by a standing ovation on your part, either at your cubicle or in the operating room. I expect to see it. Thank you. Let's move forward. Couple notes. First of all, no two hospitals are the same. And so organizations within a hospital can also vary. So you have to adapt the information in this webinar to your specific situation, to your specific hospital. The rules are generic. They apply across the board, but still adapt to your situation. This is the websites for the CMS Emergency Preparedness Guidelines. So again, I encourage you to download these, look them over. The second paragraph, 482.15, gives you 7 points of participation in the program, and you can read the emergency plan, policies, communications. We're going to concentrate on training and testing. And then the other 3 you can read yourselves. So this is the key thing that we're going to talk about today. Okay, now, training and testing, the summary is basically you have to train and test once a year. At least annually, you need to update your program and conduct a couple of drills and do training. Now, as far as the training program goes, you need to provide initial training to new and existing staff. Okay, so that includes volunteers within their expected role. So you need to provide that training annually, maintain documentation of the training, and demonstrate staff knowledge of the procedures. So how do you do that? In a drill, of course. So that would work out very well. So this is the training part of it. Testing. Now this is interesting. The guidance wants you to conduct essentially 2 exercises a year. Under item 1, a full-scale community-based exercise which would include police, EMS, fire, hazmat, et cetera, within the scope of your hospital. So there's a little caveat there, which is if you actually have a disaster that required the activation of your emergency plan, then you get a buy. You don't have to do a drill. You can take credit for the actual response and do one the following year. Now they want you to conduct an additional exercise, which is either a second full-scale exercise, community-based, or a tabletop exercise, which literally around a table, go through a scenario, set up a problem, and basically challenge the emergency plan. Now, the neat thing about a tabletop is you can get into areas which you can't really address in a community-based exercise. You can go a lot of high-tech problems or a lot of mass casualty problems that you cannot simulate in your community-based problem. So tabletop actually gives you more freedom to push the edge of the envelope as far as exercises go. Then item 3 is analyze the response. How did you do? And there's 2 ways to look at it. 1 is, did you meet your plan? And 2 is your plan appropriate? So look at it that way. And then you go back and revise your plan as needed based upon what you learned in your drill. So the proverbial big picture, starting at the top, is you have an emergency plan. That's a given. Now what I recommend is you go through the emergency plan and take out all the elements that you can test. In your plan it will state you will do this, you will have that, this will be done. Take all those elements out, compile them, and test them over a 3-year period. You can't test, say, every year doing an off-hours exercise if that's in your plan, or every year you want to involve the mayor and his cohorts in your drill. So you do that over every 3 years, once every 3 years that you commit to. Now in your plan it will say we will annually do this, semi-annually do that, and maybe once every couple of years do something else. Well, this is great. Come up with a plan over 3 years, how you're going to test all of those elements. Show this to management and it'll look like you've got your act together, which of course you will. So from that plan, 3-year plan, you get your scope and objectives. We'll talk about this in more detail. From the scope and objectives, that comes up with your evaluation criteria. So now you know your scope, your objectives, how you're going to evaluate the drill. That leads to the exercise scenario. We'll talk about this in more detail. Conduct and critique the exercise. Excuse me. This will lead to your evaluation. And guess what? You take those validation and improvement items, go all the way back to the top, and upgrade and update your emergency plan. Start the cycle all over again. So that is a proverbial big picture. Okay, where do you begin? Well, your purpose. Why are you doing this? There's 2 reasons. One is because the law requires that you do it. And number 2, it's the right thing to do, to test your plan, make sure that it works. Where else to begin? Make sure you get management support. This means personnel dedicated to the drill, personnel dedicated to the response, and some funding. Now, the neat thing about drills and exercises, they don't really cost all that much hard cash. They cost time of your personnel, time of the doctors, time of the management, time of IT, but not really a lot of cash money. So that's really a good thing. Now, you're going to get hospital and individual department support, and by support, I mean, yeah, we'll play with you, but also you need participation. It's one thing to say, yeah, we support you, but we're not sending anybody to help you. You need their participation. Same thing with any external agencies, work with them, and you'll get lots of support from the fire, police, hazmat, EMS to work with you. They do these drills all the time. Working with the hospital is frosting on their cake. They would like that. You also need to get personnel, some permissions. You get arrange your facilities. I joke about donuts and meals, but again, a lot of these people are volunteers, and so it's good to provide them donuts in the morning and meals throughout the day if you can, because you would probably be doing that in real life. Another thing is you really need an understanding and the appreciation that most of the participants are volunteers. Now, they could be forced volunteers, or they volunteer because they're good people, but understand this is not their day job. This is not what they do for a living. So they're giving you their time. Take advantage of it, but treat them properly. Again, I go back to the donuts and the meals. Carrots and sticks. The carrot is it's the right thing to do. The stick is it's the law. We must do this, and you can come up with some others. Now, I've run drills, God, many, many years, and these last bullet here about what you need to conduct a drill. You need flexibility, anger control. Sometimes when I'm developing a scenario, I swear some of my team members are going to become the mass casualty. But you work with people, everyone's got a strong ego, that's great. You use your leadership skills to get the team to develop the scenario running and get the team to conduct the exercise going. Obviously, management skills to run things. Organization, my drug of choice is aspirin, and you, of everyone in charge, you need the positive outlook. You need leadership. You need to show them that this is serious stuff and that you are leading them to do what needs to be done. So again, I cannot understress the importance of that. Lisa and I compiled a list of resources, and this is just one of hundreds that are out there to help you develop your exercise and your drills. Lots of information out there. Here's 6 that you can easily download by clicking on the appropriate hyperlink. So a lot of stuff out there. Don't think you have to do this in the blind. Lots of information out there. So the 8 great points for successful drill. I want to talk about having a plan for your organization, scope, objectives, scenario development team, timeline, participants, conduct the exercise, and how to do the critique. So the first thing we look at is we assume that you have your emergency plan. And within that plan is your emergency response organization. And of course, these are the people who will staff your drill. Now, in your plan, you should outline what actions people will take, what the policies and procedures are, what contacts you will make or call or be called, equipment, facilities, etc., that you will test in your drill. So these are all the elements in your plan that you will test in your drill. Now, most plans have what we call Incident Command System, the ICS structure. This is standard in federal, state, and local governments on how you organize your response for a disaster. Generally, it's an incident commander and 4 subgroups: finance, logistics, operations, and planning. And the neat part about this system is, one, it's adopted throughout the industry and throughout most government agencies. And 2, it's expandable, and you can contract it as necessary. So here's an incident command system, a hospital, the HICS or HEECS, as depending upon what part of the country you're in, Hospital Emergency Incident Command System. So you can see, again, incident commander, logistics, planning, finance, and operations, and how it's expanded for hospitals to meet the demand for disaster and all the different departments that are necessary to respond. So take a look at this. It is large, and it can be cut back as necessary, but this is just an overview on how you can expand the incident command system to deal with your situation. At MIT, we have a system that looks like this. To the left, we have in the field the incident command post, and the first responders, this would be fire, hazmat, police, etc. They report to the Emergency Operations Center, where we have management, and over that we have what we call the policy group, senior levels at the institute who make decisions and overall guidance for the Emergency Operations Center. The organization works with that. And in the EOC, we have our external partners, which is all the federal, state, local, and private industries that we work with at MIT to deal with an incident. And again, this can be as large or as small as you need be for the operation at hand. Next topic would be the scope. Now, what the scope is for your exercise is how large the exercise is, basically what's going to be involved, who's participating, but more importantly, who is not participating. So again, this is the scope. What's being simulated, what is not being simulated, what facilities and equipment is out there, and what's not to be used, and how far events will be played out. So this defines your exercise scope. It defines your exercise as to how big it's going to be. Now, the objectives. This is very important. If you consider your exercise a test, which a lot of people do, your exercise objectives are your test questions. So again, if your drill or exercise is a test, exercise objectives are your test questions. But you also need to know the answers. So this defines your exercise. So for example, the format I use is the objective is your test question. How you satisfy this objective is your test answer. Then what limitations do you have? How far are we going to go with this particular objective? And so I have an example here. The objective, and this comes from your plan. It would say something like we have a hospital relocation team, and it will evacuate patients from the various floors on the hospital. That's stated in your plan. You turn it into objective. Demonstrate the ability for the hospital relocation team to evacuate patients on, say, the 5th floor. Okay, that's a test question. How do we satisfy it? In this particular drill, the relocation team will develop and obtain approval of the process or the procedure for the evacuation of the patients on the 5th floor. Now, the limitations are we're not actually going to move people on the 5th floor. So that's the limitation. We're going to come up with a plan and the policy and the procedure, but not actually go out and do it. Anyone in the field on the 5th floor has to wear a drill vest, and any interface with any non-participant must be prefaced with, this is a drill or equivalent. So here's the objective, here's how we satisfy it, and these are the limitations that we have to meet this objective. Now, the neat thing about your position is you don't have to know everything about everything when you're putting together a drill. This is where you get support. So you put together a scenario development team to help you with the various parts of the drill. And in alphabetical order on the left, we've got internal support. You can read through who they are, depending upon the drill or the exercise objectives. On the right side, of course, would be external support, fire, hazmat, health department. In your town, you may want to involve the mayor or his office, and clearly the police department. So these are the people you work with to develop your scenario. I just ran an IT drill at a hospital. I am not an IT expert, but I had IT staff from the hospital work with me to develop that type of a drill. So that works out very well. So again, putting together your team. Put together a timeline, basically what the events are for your drill. Now this, I'll tell you, people, this is very, very important. Make sure every document associated with the drill or the exercise is marked with something like for training use only, for drill purposes only. If you write a document that talks about, say, a hostage situation in the emergency room or an IT failure, a data breach or something like that, you don't put on it for your training use only, somebody may think it's real, and that's the last thing you want. I have seen this happen elsewhere. I have seen this happen. So in every document associated with your drill or exercise, please make sure it says for training use only. Now, what type of scenario events can you put in your drills? Now, this is kind of interesting because only in our scenario, only in our business, can we call these types of disasters typical. So what type of scenario events could you have? Well, snow, severe weather, ice, you can read all that good stuff, natural disasters. A human-caused emergency, workplace violence, security threat, fire, flooding, a strike could be part of your drill. Technology, of course, data breach, a utility interruption, the network down. Now, that'll cause lots of grief. Then, of course, in our industry, public health, pandemic, mass casualty, a disease outbreak would be what I would call typical disaster scenarios we could use. Now, something to think about is we are hospitals. So what is specific to hospitals that we could test? Patients, we have patients. So how to feed patients with the power out, how to shelter in place. We could have problems in dedicated rooms like the ICU or the emergency room. You may have a lab. Most hospitals have an open campus with open spaces. Visitors are everywhere. So that could be factored into your drill. Suspicious activities, you can read this. An employee scandal could be used, but again, if you're using a large-scale drill with police and fire, a scandal is probably not the type of thing you want to involve. So, use these cautiously. And then, of course, regulation violations, lots of area on that to write in for an exercise, at least part of an exercise. Now, you may be a specific hospital, say a children's hospital or a veterans hospital, and those are going to have different responsibilities, different organizations, different facilities and equipment. So I call these specific hospital-specific events that you could factor in. Something that happens at a children's hospital would not necessarily happen at a veterans hospital. So you'd want to factor that in to your drill and exercise. And something that I'm sure you've all read about is, guess what? Healthcare is becoming the leading data breach target. It used to be credit cards. Now, for some reason, the bad actors have determined that healthcare information is a lot more valuable than credit card numbers. And so you can read the numbers about data breaches. So again, this would be something to test on. So the first thing you want to do is develop your timeline, and this is what your timeline looks like. To the left is the time, the middle is the key event, and the right is your expected actions or comments. So your basic format is we're starting at 9 because this is in the scope. We need to be done by 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and we're going to allow an hour for the critique. So that's the basic timeline format. Now what we have to do is fill it in. So your first preliminary timeline might look something like this. So we need something that drives the incident command system and community response to activate. So we're thinking, hey, how about an explosion in the emergency room? Also, the objectives, we need to compromise the data center. So we need to come up with something like that. So roughly at 8:45, something happens. Don't know what it is yet. We'll figure it out. We assemble the team and get the incident command system running. And let's say something happened in the Roadrunner wing emergency room. So now on the right, we know that when we talk to the responders, they would have a damage report and the status report early on. So as part of the drill, we would develop that for drill purposes only and submit that to the ER, to the incident command system leader, or whoever gets that, and distribute it as it would be distributed in real life so we can test that. So we figured about 9 o'clock, the incident command system should start responding. Then later we want to do the data center problem. So roughly 10:15, our timeline says we'll report that a data center problem has come in. We don't know what it is yet, but we'll get there. Now on the right, it says contact local FBI. And here's a tip. Contact your local FBI if you're going to do a data breach system. They have a lot of knowledge, a lot of good information. In fact, they will come to your facility and talk about data breaches, how they detect them, how they activate, and what they can do to help you, and what tips they would have for you when you get a data breach. If you want to bring them to a local hospital group, hospital meeting, that would be fine. But contact a local FBI. A lot of good information there. Okay, moving on with our timeline. We're going to determine that several employees and EMS were injured during the event, and they're being transferred to the Wiley Hospital. So now we're going to test transferring from our hospital to another hospital. And again, I say need names, so that's something that we need to add in the next update of the drill. Then at 11:30, we're going to have the employee dies of his injuries, and this gets the whole HR thing moving as far as notification of the family, how you'll deal with the press and the public, et cetera, et cetera. So we want to test that. I always recommend the working lunch. Keep people responding during lunch, because that's how it's going to be in real life. And then, like I said, at 3 o'clock, we'll conclude the exercise, start to critique. All right, let's look at the next level of timeline. So we've determined that a small explosion will occur in the Roadrunner wing emergency room. On the right hand, set up the room for post-explosion. In other words, make it look like there's an explosion, if you can get away with this. Otherwise, you can simulate with pieces of paper and messages. But if you have the opportunity to set up a room that looks like it's had an explosion, that is great. At 8:45, we send out the initial notifications. And notice on the right-hand column, we have the damage report and the status report. But how can we forget about social media? So something happens, we want to distribute drill tweets about the event, because that's the way it's going to be in real life. That's the way a lot of people are actually going to learn about these events. By 9 o'clock, we expect the team to assemble and respond as necessary. 9:15, the injuries, we talked about that. And one thing we learned, that the hospital would set up a makeshift ER as well as transferring people to the Wiley Hospital. That is in their procedure. So We've modified the drill timeline to reflect that. We have a data breach occurring at the data center, but we want the data center to stay operational. So we might have a ransomware event to keep the data center up and running, but still have something IT needs to deal with. And then we start injecting through other messages. And at 10:45, this is from a drill I ran a couple of weeks ago at a hospital, that we had a ransomware event, simulated of course, and that the Windows database files were encrypted. How do people respond to that? So the timeline actually was malicious Russian agents installed ransomware on Windows-based PCs, and the hospital had to deal with that. We have an employee die of his injuries. Lunch, we do the critique, and then we conclude the exercise. Okay, so that would be the semi-final timeline. 1 or 2 rounds more, and that would be the final timeline. Now, how do we start to drill off? You've got a couple of choices. One is nothing's happening, then boom, something happens and we go into it. Or something is happening now, and then we have to activate the team, and then they respond to it. Or what I say, stuff has happened, the event is over, but now the team has been activated, now what do we do? So when you start off your drill or exercise, you've got 3 choices how you want to start it off. So again, factor that in. Participants, responders come from your emergency plan. You've got a contact list. You should have primary and alternates. These are the people you want to test. So use your staff. You can draft people. You can even make field promotions if necessary. Controllers are people who make sure that the exercise proceeds as planned, that they don't go off to a different road that you weren't planning. They inject the pre-scripted messages. They observe. They coordinate. They make sure non-exercise people or events don't interrupt the response. And they record actions, successes, and problem areas for input into the evaluation. Okay? And who would be the best people to work on, be controllers? Your scenario development team. So that would be great. There's a built-in team. Now, some people have independent evaluators who come in and evaluate the exercise. They report compliance with the plan, compliance with federal guidelines, familiar with the evaluation criteria. So they don't control, they evaluate. Now these are usually from audit or risk management. In a lot of cases, I just use the controller as the evaluator. So we have a combination controller evaluator role. So here's some examples of what controller team would look like. A lead drill controller in one of several areas, and a controller in each of those areas. The lower left to be a lead disaster recovery plan controller for the IT, someone monitoring applications, someone monitoring infrastructure, someone monitoring the hot side. And over on the right for tabletop drill, you are it. You are the controller and evaluator because it's a relatively small event. This a large-scale exercise. This is from a corporate exercise I've done. And you can see different areas, different buildings have their own controllers. It almost mimics the response organization. So every group that has, every group in the drill has a controller to make sure that they're responding and being evaluated properly. Participants, more. You may have some observers who want to watch the exercise, and that's great, but they have to have your permission. They do not interact with responders. They are there to observe. So maybe people from another hospital, people from local businesses want to watch. That's fine, but they sit back and they watch only. If you want them to participate in the critique, that's fine. Not a problem. They can provide some valuable third-party point of view. You also have some non-participants. Basically, you inform them about the exercise, keep them out of the way, and post signs like these. And I just pulled these off the internet. Emergency operations training in progress. There's a drill sign on the right in 5 different languages. So again, post these so people understand that you have a drill in progress. Here's a drill we ran in California for Cisco. It was a mass casualty drill, and you can see a lot of this was set to bring their people on the outside. So if you're driving by and you see something like this, you might be worried about what's going on at Cisco. So they posted big signs, making sure that everyone understood that there was training in progress, that what you saw was part of a drill. Now, on the other hand, make sure that if you're doing a drill, people know about it. This was a situation that happened several years ago, but I still use it as training. A group of consultants working with the hospital set up a mock armed robbery in the emergency room, and the people they set up to look like druggies, and they broke into the emergency room. They waved guns. They started yelling and screaming that they wanted drugs. They took hostages and locked a couple nurses up into a room. It was all part of a drill, but no one in the ER knew that. Can you imagine this? So again, if you're going to do a drill, make sure that people know about it, and especially non-participants work on this. And if you're going to use a consultant, make sure they know what they're doing. Adding to the realism, it's one thing to do a drill. It's another thing if you can actually have equipment that's broken, colored sand, or even water to simulate spills, tape off inaccessible areas. Most of you are familiar with boulage for training to simulate victims, injuries. That works fantastic. If you can, disable actual systems. For you IT people transferring to a, can you transfer to a hot site? That'd be a great thing to test. Throw in exercise messages, audio, video, Facebook, mock news reports. The big thing now, I'm using a lot of YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook posts that, of course, this is a drill for training purposes only, to get the people to respond to the event. And finally, something, if you really want to be creative, is get a local college or university with journalism students, bring them in to act as the news media. And the only difference between a journalism student and this news media is eventually the news media let go. The J students, they keep at it. They want to impress their professors and their friends. And so they do actually a tougher job than news media. So this will test your corporate communications department. So here's an example of an exercise message. You would inject this to the incident commander and say, this is from security, and security says, we just saw a car drive into a chemical truck in our parking lot. Now you can do that, or you can actually go out and do something like this. So for the first time since college, I actually went out, bought a car for $25, we placed it near a tanker, filled up the tanker with water, and on the ground was some kind of foaming agent, which simulated some chemical, which I forget the name of, but it was a mass casualty event, and people were covered with this chemical, people were inhaling the chemical, and people responded to the event, and it was realism. It was excellent. So something like this, you can use your imagination and come up with a lot of good things that make it real to your responders. During the day of the exercise, you conduct briefings for your controllers, the evaluators, conduct a briefing for the responders, going over the objectives, the simulation, who you're going to contact, who you're going to simulate in contacts. And then I recommend this can be your annual training day. So an hour prior to your exercise, do your annual training. This is the plan. These are the procedures. This is the organization. This is the communications. This is the notification system. And then fold that right into the drill. Done this successfully in a lot of places, and it meets both criteria. Pre-stage your people and your props like I showed on the previous slide with the car. And then whatever else you need to do to get the thing running, there you go. Start the exercise. So we talked about controlling it. You have people out there controlling the exercise, making sure that it's on path. Conclude the exercise at the appointed time, and then conduct the critique. Talk about the critique in a couple of minutes. In fact, let's do it right now. So I recommend when you do your critique, which is some people call it a hot wash, some people call it a post-mortem, and I don't recommend the use of the word post-mortem because for you Latin scholars that means after death. I don't want you to have your people thinking that you just went through a death event, now it's after death. So call it a critique. When you do it right after the drill. If you're at various locations, do it in the location. Then you may need to get together the next day with everybody and do the critique then, and that's fine. How you do it, what I like to do is get everybody in the room, and everyone is equal stay. So you've got the CEO and the secretary, the doctor and the nurse. Everybody is equal as far as input into the drill. I just start with my left hand, work my way around the room, and ask for their comments. And I say we have a limited amount of time. So what we're going to do is identify critique items. We are not going to resolve them. We are not going to repeat someone's previous item. So if you start getting into this is how we resolve an issue, you will be there for, I don't know, 2 weeks. Because people try to come up with ways to fix the event, to fix the problem. Don't. Just identify it and figure it out. Do it right and keep your job. Telling people they didn't do a good job, it requires a little political skill and a lot of tact. So basically agree that this is an issue that we need to look at, write it down, and move forward. And deal with any personal or personnel issues privately later. I've had situations where people tell about, they basically demean a vice president or a CEO. Not a good thing to drill. I think it's called career suicide. So we don't want to do that in a drill. So just keep it professional, keep it above board, and keep it flowing. After your successful drill, now what do? Come up with an action plan. And this is the format I've been using for many, many years. It's called a stoplight chart. You can see in the right-hand column, there's a status. Red is not started, yellow is underway, and green is completed. This way you can just visually look at a status report and see what it looks like. And if you sort this by department, you can see which department has got more reds than greens. And that provides some severe incentive to management to get these groups up and running. So let's look at a couple. Like number one, one of the observations was, and these are from a drill I just ran a couple of weeks ago. These are actual items. A lot of people did not have contact information on their cell phones. They were on the plan, and they had a notification system, but if they needed to do one-on-one contacts, they didn't have the information. So we need to determine the policy, because if it was a company, if you will, a hospital cell phone, HR said you could put anything you want on because it's company-owned. If it's a personal cell phone, your rights are kind of limited. So the outcome was we need to establish a policy and determine what the policy is and then implement it. So we assigned that to HR person. The second one was the incident command system was in the plan of this hospital. They declared that the incident command system would be up and running within 15 minutes of initial notification. In this particular case, the hospital ICS wasn't declared operational for 22 minutes. And, in and of itself, it's not a big deal, but the plan says 15 minutes. So either change the plan or fix the response. And what happened, the ICS leader was late, and they became focused on a minor equipment problem, so much so that he forgot to activate the facility. It was, he thought about it afterwards, that was really stupid. Okay, we learned. So the solution was we need to have training for the ICS leaders just to make sure they don't get waylaid by some stupid little thing. And so that training is underway, and these dates are not the real dates. I just put magic dates down there. Now, the third one was kind of interesting because the emergency staff wanted to use the hospital PA system for some communications, but the respondents didn't know if they could use it. They didn't even know who owned the PA system. It was always there, and it never broke down, so no one knew. And then how far could they go if they say something that's like critical or emergency related over the PA system? Everybody in the hospital gets to know about it. Do they want that? So the resolution was, we need to look at the system, who owns it, who operates it, how far does it get broadcast, and they came up with a policy, and that was actually completed very, very quickly because no one ever looked at it before. We got the facilities lead to find out what it was, and issue solved. So that worked out very well. But this action plan shows that management is, they show management what the issues are, and you can show the regulators, if necessary, here's the action plan, here's how we get it done. All right? Moving on. One thing that Everbridge lets me do is talk about the Crisis Management Business Continuity course at MIT, and we do have that, so please check it out. We have it. Several hospital people do show up and partake of the course. And if that doesn't get you incentive, think about having this on your desk or on your wall or at home or your office. Anyway, I love developing drills and exercises. To me, that's where the rubber meets the road, where the money meets the pocket, whatever. Because it gets people involved. It's real life. It shows people these are the plans, these are how we're going to respond, and this is how it's going to work. It's hard work. It is work. It could take 1 to 3 months for tabletop, sometimes 6 months or more for large, full-scale exercise. You need support from senior management. You need support from your agencies outside. You have to have the desire to really test your program. Don't let things slip. Test it, and if it doesn't work, great, fix it. You need your attention to detail, because that's what's going to kill you, is the little details. And finally, you need leadership. You need creativity. You need foresight. Again, I think it's the best part of what we do. And after the seminar, I'm hoping you can do it. So if you need any information, want to chat, any advice, just want to run an idea by me, not a problem. There's my corporate information. Feel free. The website, I need work on it, I know, but the email works, so please feel free to give me a contact. Not a problem. Be glad to talk with you. Now I'm going to turn it over to Lisa.
Thank you so much, Steve. That was a great presentation.
Thank you.
Really enjoyed it. I learned a lot. We are going to be going over your questions. We've already had quite a few in. If you've thought of any in between, please feel free to add your questions now. I will do, there were 2 or 3 questions asking if the slides will be available. Yes, we will be emailing the slides to you in a day or two. We'll also be doing a video of the webinar, so you'll be able to review that. So just look for that little question box and we'll add those in. While we're waiting for your questions to come in, I did just want to review a couple of things that can make drilling easier. So one of the things you might want to consider is templates. Of course, they're used, code alerts are used on a regular basis throughout the hospital, but they can be adapted for emergency preparedness plans as well. One of the things that you might want to consider is you're going to be activating a different team if there's a data breach than if there's a chemical spill. So how are you going to put those groups together so that the proper notification can happen? So just a couple of things to think about there. We do, Everbridge does have a critical communication platform that works across the entire spectrum of the hospital, all the way to patient transfers. If your hospital is in a disaster situation and needs to evacuate patients, we have HIPAA compliance, HIPAA Bridge to work with outside agencies or other hospitals, keeping HIPAA compliance throughout the entire process. That's going to be about it. One of the things that Everbridge deeply believes in is that good communication is good medicine. So we hope that you take that into consideration. And let me start scrolling through some of the questions. Okay, your position on periodic updating and embedding of critical content, what to do, where to go, how to get there, into the memory of every personal electronic devices so that one need not rely on connectivity to instruct and direct at a time when service is down.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so what do you think about that?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the big problems that IT people think about, of course, is the network is down and internet is down. And so those of you who rely on, I'm just going to log on and get my emergency plan, not a good policy. So have it out there somewhere that doesn't rely on connectivity. Absolutely.
One of the things that I'm going to sort of add in on there is that Everbridge is SOC 2 and SOC 3 certified, which means if the civilian networks are down, there's a good shot that we're up as well. So we are at the same level as FEMA. So if FEMA officials can interact with each other, we have the same clearance levels as they do. So that is something to kind of keep in mind. Another question that I have is, how much time should a team take to plan a drill?
Oh, depends upon how big the drill is and who's going to be involved. I can put a tabletop together in under a month, and I've run a drill that took me over a year to develop. That was for a federal nuclear plant, but I would say at least a couple of months for tabletop and probably 3 or 4 for large-scale exercise, round numbers.
And then we have another question. So their facility is a second-level responder. They're a rehab hospital. So if a local area hospital sends a simulated patient, will that count as community involvement?
Yeah, I think so. You'd have to check the regulations, but community involvement more is police, fire, hazmat. But I would check it out. Check out with your agency and see.
Okay. And I would say there are specific regulations. There's the CMS guidelines delineate 17 different types of hospitals. So you would want to go through and check the specific regulations for your hospital. It will take you a little bit of research, Jean. The document is over 600 pages long. They were quite thorough. But the underlying guideline for CMS is that the weakest, most vulnerable population, which is patients, are protected at all times. So that's kind of the underlying message behind these new guidelines. So this next one, we get on a very regular basis. They don't have the support of the administration or the staff for drills. So any ideas how to get them involved?
Yeah, that's a concern not only in healthcare but in just every other industry. Like I said, the carrots and sticks. The carrot being it's the right thing to do. We need to test this. Down to we will feed you if you show up to the drill. Being a little facetious but true. The other thing is the stick, which is, hey, this is the law. We have to do this. Who in management should I report that you're not participating? And I hate to use sticks like that, but or let me tell your boss that you won't participate. Again, I hate to use that type of stuff, but once in a while, you need to pull that. But try the carrots. It's the right thing to do, and everyone else in the hospital is participating. You should too.
And then a quick question from Kelly about how you adapt this drill to a behavioral psych hospital. It's sort of the same as the rehab hospital. There are specific parameters around it. Behavior psych hospitals are delineated as one of the 17. So you want to just go and look up the regulations specifically for your type of patient population, and that will guide you in what you need to prepare for. We are getting a couple of questions. I'm going to kind of combine them. What type of language should you use when you're preparing a drill, working with your staff and outside agencies, and then what type of language should you use when you're sending messages out during an actual event?
Yeah, one of the comments is, why aren't I using language consistent with the HSEEP? And actually, I should be. I tend to go between drill and exercise, critique, improvement matrix. Call it what you want. The result is still an action plan to get things done. I do agree, though, I should be a little more consistent in the terminology. It's a problem in the overall business continuity industry. We don't have common language the way we really should. We're getting there, but I do agree with the comment.
This is an excellent comment, and I'll actually send out, we did a whole webinar on this. Yeah. So nurses have a concern regarding leaving their patients behind and addressing run, hide, fight. So what should be expected of them?
Well, they need, this is a tough one. Run, hide, fight, of course, is what happens when you have an active shooter on property. Basically, I understand that you don't want to leave your patients behind, but this involves your life. And so I would follow the guidance, and it's a horrible, tragic situation. But if you need to abandon patients, do what your conscience tells you to do. That's up to you. It's up to people personally. But the guidance is run, hide, then fight, and that's just the way it is.
Yep. And we did do a webinar just a couple months ago that worked with a legal consultant from the HR perspective, and then also with an expert in active shooter, and they covered both ends of it. Okay, one final question, and it is talking about guides and books and stuff. We will include that in the follow-up email. We'll give you the resources, and then we are, again, including the slides, so you'll be able to see the 6 resources that we had listed there and check them out yourselves. At that, I'm going to wrap up today's webinar. Steve, thank you so much for coming today. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Everbridge.
And we will be doing a series of webinars starting January 18th to talk about the CMS guidelines and make sure that you are up to snuff. And you can call us at any time for a gap analysis. If you're not sure where your hospital is in regards to the CMS guidelines, we'd be happy to go over that with you and see if there's any gaps that you need with coverage. And Steve, of course, is available to help you run your drills. So thank you very much. We will see everybody soon.